Chapter 15. Dad takes a radio from the shelf and sits down with Sparky and me. He turns the dials. Between gaps of nothing come static and noises like sound bending. He goes back to the static and fiddles around, but all he gets is crackling, scratchy noise. "What about the Civil Defense Channel?" Mr. McGovern asks. "Tried it." Dad turns the dial. There's nothing. How can this be a war? No explosions, no shots being fired, not a sound from above. After he snaps off the radio, it's silent except for Paula's sniffs. It feels like a long time has passed, but it can't be more than an hour or two since Dad picked up Sparky and carried him down the hall to the playroom. Sparky yawns and rubs his eyes. I can't believe he's actually sleepy. Maybe he's too young to really understand what's happened. So far, Ronnie and I have avoided looking at each other. Last night, just a few hours before Dad shook me awake, Ronnie and I had the first fist fight of our lives. It happened on the way back from having birthday cake at Why Can't You Be Like Johnny's house, and now I don't know whether to still be angry at him or just trying to forget. It seems crazy to be mad at each other now that World War III has started, but I can't help feeling a little sore at him, and I wonder if Ronnie feels sore at me too. Sitting with his parents just a few feet away, Ronnie shakes his head as if he's trying to fight drowsiness. Like me, he's probably afraid that something bad may happen while he's asleep. Sparky yawns again, then lays his head down on Dad's lap. His yawn makes me want to yawn too, but I cover my mouth and try to fight it. "Maybe you should get some sleep, Scott," Dad says. "I don't want to." "I think you do. It's okay. You need the rest." Dad slides his arm under Sparky and lifts him to the bunk above Mom's. Then he turns to me. "There's room for both of you." I climb the bunk ladder, and when my face is level with Dad's, I whisper, "You sure you'll be all right?" Dad smiles weakly. "Yes." When I'm on the bunk bed with Sparky, Dad covers us with the scratchy army blanket. He kisses me on the forehead, then tells Ronnie he can use the other upper bunk if he wants, and Paula can have the one below it. But Paula doesn't want to leave her dad. Ronnie climbs up to the bunk catty-corner to the one Sparky and I are on. Our eyes meet when he lies down. His mom covers him with a blanket. The bunk has a small pillow, and I lay my head on it and close my eyes, but only pretend to sleep. After a while, I open one eye a tiny bit. Dad must have covered the flashlight with something because it's dimmer in the shelter, but not completely dark. The Shaws and McGoverns are sitting on the floor with their backs to the wall. Janet sits by herself. In the shadows, Dad stands in the middle of the shelter with his ear close to the water tank and taps lightly with his knuckles. A faint, hollow echo comes from inside. Then he lowers his head and looks down, I think toward Mom. He kneels and disappears from view. Quietly, I inch to the edge of the bunk and look over. Dad is sitting beside Mom, holding her limp hand in one of his. His other hand covers his eyes. His shoulders tremble, and I know he's hiding tears. Chapter 16. Like a prisoner, I was marched through the kitchen where Sparky and Mom had started eating dinner. Sparky stopped in mid-chew and watched as we passed. I could tell he knew where Dad and I were going. Outside, the air was cool, the moon big and round in the dark sky. "What am I supposed to say?" I asked. "What do you think you should say?" "I'm sorry?" "And that you promise never to take anything that isn't yours again." When Dad rang the Lewandowski's doorbell, the door opened so quickly that I knew Mrs. Lewandowski had been waiting for us. Behind her stood Linda and 3 of her 4 brothers and sisters, all watching curiously. Linda's and my eyes met, and I felt my insides twist into a knot while my face grew hot with shame and remorse. I apologized to Linda's mother and promised I would never take anything that wasn't mine again. Mrs. Lewandowski said she appreciated it. Then she and Dad nodded at each other as if they'd completed a deal, and my eyes met Linda's for a second time. When she looked away, I knew I was doomed. As Dad and I walked home through the dark, I couldn't help thinking that even though all my hopes and dreams regarding Linda had been dashed, apologizing wasn't as horrible as I'd imagined it would be. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" Dad asked. I almost agreed, but then caught myself. If I sounded too happy about apologizing, he might think it wasn't punishment enough and decide to spank me anyway. So I tried to sound unhappy. "It wasn't great. How come you didn't just spank me?" "Don't you think you're a little too old to get spanked?" His answer caught me by surprise. I'd never realized there was an age limit for spankings. This was the best news I'd heard in a long time. Back home, Sparky was taking a bath. While Mom served Dad and me a slightly cold dinner, she asked how it had gone, and Dad said fine. And then she left to make sure Sparky washed behind his ears. My brother went to bed at 8, but I was allowed to stay up until 8:30. A small reading lamp on my night table provided just enough light to read Mad Magazine, or its inferior imitator, Cracked. After I was in bed, Mom and then Dad would come in and kiss me goodnight. That night when Dad came in, I whispered, "What'll happen if the Russians drop the bomb?" He thought for a moment, and the wrinkles near his eyes deepened. "It'll be the end, I'm afraid." "Of everything?" He seemed to hesitate, then nodded. It made me wonder if he thought that since I was now old enough not to be spanked, I was also old enough to hear the truth. "We'll all be killed?" I asked. "Well, some people are building bomb shelters. They say that if you can stay below ground and away from the radiation for 2 weeks, you can probably survive." "Should we have one?" I asked. "I've been thinking about it." It seemed odd that he'd only been thinking when it could save our lives. As if Dad could read my mind, he said, "They're expensive, Scott. And a lot of people think that because we've reached the point of mutually assured destruction, war no longer makes sense." He sighed. "The problem is, wars almost never make sense." But that never stopped anyone before.